Danse, Tracy Bear Ntsigasan, Montreal Lake Cree Nation, Otsunia. Hi, I'm Tracy Bear and I'm from Montreal Lake Cree Nation in Treaty 6 territory, Saskatchewan. I've been at the University of Alberta since 2002, and since receiving my PhD in 2016, I've been an assistant professor at the Faculty of Native Studies and Department of Women's and Gender Studies. I'm also the director for the Indigenous Women and Youth Resiliency Project and the academic lead on the massive open online course called Indigenous Canada that has over 230,000 learners across the globe. My question today, and the title of this talk is, how does reconciliation with Indigenous people work in the face of Canadian nationalism? Canada hosted the Olympics in Vancouver 2010, and the entire world looked on. Canadians swelled with pride, excitement, and achievement of our athletes. Who didn't feel this pride? I know I did. And who didn't buy those cute little Olympic red mittens? I did that too. The energy and pride in Canada was palpable. Nationalism surged. And for those of you that need a reminder, nationalism, as defined by Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is, quote, a sense of national consciousness, exalting one nation above all others, and placing primary emphasis on promotion of its culture and interest, as opposed to those of other nations, end quote. The Olympics gave our nation the chance to show off our Canadian identity to the world. And when asked about this idea of Canadian identity, Will Kimlicka, a professor of political philosophy at Queen's University, said that Canadians believe they are good citizens of the world, that they are part of the new world, and are distinctly non-American. Pride is a complex notion related to identity, self-esteem, and loyalty, as well as pleasure. National pride is similar and is described as, quote, a feeling of deep pleasure or satisfaction derived from the connection to the achievements, qualities, or possessions that are widely admired. And generally, the global perspective of Canada is extraordinary. Just Google this phrase, Canada is the most. Can you guess what comes up? Canada is the most educated in the world, most diverse, most beautiful country, most friendly, and most multicultural country in the world. As well, Canada is known for its natural resources, scenic wonders, clean land, clean water, high life expectancy, and amazing healthcare. Who wouldn't enjoy feeling pride about a country like this? I want you to sit with this emotion right now, this emotion, pride. My favorite stories about Canada fill me with pride. Here's a story. When I worked in Golden, BC as a teaching assistant, every Friday afternoon I traveled 40 minutes to a little town, tiny little town called Field that sat on the side of a mountain. From the highway, you could see the school, the gas stations, all the houses, and the outdoor skating hockey arena that lit up at night. So one evening, traveling in their comfortable bus from Calgary to Vancouver, Field's in the middle there, the Canadian women's hockey team drove past in the night to see the skating rink lit up. And they saw kids playing out there, shimmy hockey. And the captain of the team, Haley Wickenhauser, asked to turn the bus around to play a game with these Field kids. They turned the bus around, they suited up, and they played hockey with the kids and gave them an unforgettable experience. Those kids talked about that night forever. I wasn't even there that evening, and I still talk about that night to this day. I feel such pride, national pride. It's a strong but complex feeling, and it's a very comfortable place to stay, to linger. To the world, and indeed, even many Canadians would never know the turmoil and tension that exists between the original inhabitants of this land and the rest of the country. My talk isn't a history lesson. I hope you'll access the free online course Indigenous Canada for that. But I will need to provide you with some stats to give you an idea of the current realities of Indigenous people of Canada. Now, one thing you need to remember is Indigenous adults only represent 3% of the adult population in Canada. Indigenous people experience poverty, the highest level of poverty more than any other group in Canada. And according to Statistics Canada, 1 in 4 Indigenous people, or 25%, live in poverty. 47% of Indigenous children live in poverty. Poverty and ill health are inextricably linked. The lower your socioeconomic status, the worse your health will be. According to the National Centre of Aboriginal Health, poverty has many dimensions. Material deprivation, which includes food, shelter, sanitation, and safe drinking water. Social exclusion, lack of education, unemployment, and low income, each of which diminishes opportunities, limits choices, and undermines hope and threatens health, end quote. The Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, RCAP, states that, quote, Indigenous people are at the bottom of almost every available index of socioeconomic living in the world, while non-Aboriginal Canadians have one of the highest standards of living in the world, end quote. Indigenous women represent 38% of the population in prisons, while Indigenous men represent 26% of the populations of prisons in Canada. And despite the fact that Canada has the 3rd largest freshwater supply in the world, at any given time, 100 First Nations communities are under water advisories due to decades of contaminations from chemicals, residue from resource extraction. For generations, many Indigenous communities must still abide by the advisories of boil water, do not consume, do not use. And although I could go on about the discrepancies between Indigenous peoples and the rest of non-Indigenous Canadians, I'll stop here because I think you get the picture. When we stay with the easy nationalistic histories of Canada, our feelings are positive. We feel pride, strength, and we may take comfort in the idea that Indigenous people were either conquered fairly or that the founding of Canada was a series of peaceful negotiations. Then there are the difficult histories of Indigenous peoples' experiences with Canada. After completing our Indigenous Canada course, many learners write into us and they share these feelings of uncomfortability, disbelief, anger, confusion, shame, guilt, and complicity. Learners have also overwhelmingly said that they feel a sense of betrayal, that they had never learned this history before. Learners are angry that the history wasn't shared, that our elementary and secondary school curricula didn't include treaties, let alone residential schools or the 60s scoop. There is a movie in a dystopic future called The Matrix. You may remember it. And the hero, Neo, is presented with the choice to take the red pill or the blue pill. Do you remember this moment? Morpheus says, you take the red pill and you get an unpleasant truth that is reality. Or the blue pill, where you remain blissfully ignorant. It's awful tempting to take the blue pill. Take the blue pill and you continue with all these good feelings and emotions. You can remain comfortable in your knowledge that Indigenous people were conquered and your ancestors were the winners in the race of civilization. You remain happily ignorant about the disregard for treaties made between Indigenous nations and the Crown, the decimation of Indigenous population through disease, starvation, and the legislation of the Indian Act. To take the red pill, you'd be faced with uncomfortable truths. You may feel disbelief, anger, guilt, perhaps shame. And these histories would challenge you to rethink all that you know about Indigenous people's histories with Canada. Take the red pill, and you're confronted perhaps with your own privilege, culpability, leading to feelings of confusion and perhaps complicity. Then there was this guy, Cypher. He betrayed Morpheus. He handed him over to the bad guys. And what did Cypher want as payment? He wanted to undo the effects of the red pill. He wanted to get put back in the matrix, to forget the truth and the reality of his world. I understand this temptation of the blue pill. Ignorance is bliss, right? But for who? Certainly not for Indigenous people. So what does this mean? What can you do? It means researching and seeking out knowledge. It also means recognizing your privilege, the privilege that settler cultures have and often take for granted. It's not easy being an ally. Sometimes it's a thankless job, much like an educator. It requires social action, courage, and a lot of humility. What Indigenous people, what I humbly request is you take that red pill. It's not going to be easy to learn another version of your history of your country, to understand that the foundation of your country is not what you thought. Reconciliation in the face of Canadian nationalism cannot happen without taking that red pill. Eximaga, thank you for listening.